Could Dwane Casey be on his way out after this season for the Detroit Pistons? We're going to talk about that with our special guest today on today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Eddie Johnson with 1 second to go.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I'm your host, Koo Cahill. You can find me over on Twitter at Koo Cahill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button. We're on our way to 5,000 subscribers. We're also in a competition with Locked On Blazers. We're trying to catch up to them and surpass them in this little race we're doing at the Locked On Network. We're just under 200 subscribers away from Locked On Blazers. So again, and 52% of you guys who listen to the podcast are not subscribed. So make sure you guys go hit that subscribe button and help us overtake Locked On Blazers. Or if you listen to this on podcast platforms, make sure you go ahead and leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Today we're going to be talking about Dwane Casey and some quotes that he came out with that could the Pistons be moving on from him after this season. We'll talk about that. Is there pressure on Troy Weaver to put a good product on the floor next season? And how far away are the Pistons realistically? We're going to talk about all of that with our special guest today, Corey Woods, beat writer over at mlive.com for the Detroit Pistons. You guys can find him over on Twitter at Corey E. Woods. Corey, thank you for coming on, man. I appreciate you taking time out of your day to come on here. Really appreciate it. Over the past day or so, the Pistons community has been going crazy. Absolutely going crazy. I'm sure you've seen it.
Yeah,
it's been some crazy stuff going on. We haven't even had anything confirmed yet. Nothing's even really happened yet. However, we got some quotes from Dwane Casey after this past game against the Brooklyn Nets, and let me read it for everyone who maybe hasn't heard what this quote is, and I want to get your thoughts on it. Omari Sankofa of the Free Press asked Dwane Casey about coming back and how meaningful it would be to come back to the Pistons, and Dwane Casey said, quote, "It would be good, but I want to do what's best for the organization, whether it's coming back, coaching. I love coaching. I love teaching. I'm not going to sit here and predict the future. We'll see what happens in the future. We've got 2 games to go. There will be a lot of time to sit down and figure everything out, whether it's coming back here and coach or whatever the decision Tom has or Troy has for me. I'm a big boy. I'm not going to fade away or fade into the sunset or anything like that. There's a lot of basketball still in there for me. I'm not sitting here looking for a pity or anything like that. Whatever Tom decides to do and Troy decides to do, it will be that way." So, Corey, what was your immediate takeaway? I know, like, Pistons fans and the community was immediately, "Oh, Dwane Casey's not coming back. It's over. He's leaving." What was your immediate takeaway? I believe you probably were in the press room when
I was in the press room when he came in there, because normally, just want to add a little bit of context to that. So normally during the home games, Little Caesars Arena, after the first player comes in, we'll speak with Casey about 15 to 20 minutes somewhere after the final buzzer. Yesterday was a little bit different than the norm because it took him about close to an hour to finally hit the podium. So that was a little bit different, and obviously we know why, because he was talking with team governor Tom Gores. And the thing that first struck me about the comments was the change in his tone. Since I've been covering the team after practices, when we're talking to Dwane Casey about the future, he's always talking about, the development, looking forward towards next season. Like it's almost sounded as if he was like guaranteed or made some assurances that, hey, we know what you're dealing with this season. You're going to be back next season. So he was really talking like a coach that was confident he'll be back. Yesterday was the first time I've heard him talk in a manner that, hey, maybe this could go in a different direction. And that, to me, was just the first immediate thought, like, wait a minute. He's not speaking with the same confidence that he knows was about to happen that he did before. Now he's talking about, hey, I have a year of my contract left. Hey, it's whatever Troy and Tom decide to do. That wasn't the same Dwane that has been talking the past couple of weeks when he's been talking about the future.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm not in the media room this year, but like seeing the quotes and just listening to Dwane Casey over the last few years, I completely agree that he's talked like somebody that is confident that he will be back next season. He's talked like someone who's here for the long haul. That is pretty confident in where he's going to be and where he's at. And that was, I agree. That was the first takeaway I had. He sounded like somebody who I wouldn't say he was coming out and confirming that he's going to be gone next year, but he came out and he sounded like somebody who, and I'm glad you mentioned that. That wasn't in the quote, but he did meet with Tom Gores before his post-game interview, and he did go on to say later on that he was going to sit with Tom again after the season, and they would discuss his future options. So all of that together, again, I don't think it confirms that he's not coming back next year, but I do think it 100% gives a different tone that there is a realistic possibility that he may not be here next year. And I feel like for a lot of people, at least in the Pistons community, I feel like a lot of us have kind of expected that he would be here next year, and then next year would be like the final one. But I think there's a chance that may not be the case. And the tone, like you said, it definitely changed, and it feels like he's comfortable with the idea, or at least it sounds like that he feels at peace with the idea of maybe he may not be here next year. Do you
Yeah, that's the other part of it. Is just like he was so energetic these past couple of weeks about talking about, the development of guys. I even asked him a question a couple of weeks ago about the summer league. Like, hey, we know the way the season's going. Have you guys talked about who may possibly be on some of the summer league rosters? He didn't see it, and he said we haven't got that far yet. But he was just really amped about the development of Ivy and Cade and that tandem working out over the summer and the development of Duran. But now it's like, okay, there's a little bit of, I'll say, apathy in the way that he was speaking.
So would you say, I don't want to put you on the spot here, and you don't have to answer directly if you don't feel comfortable doing so, but if you had to bet money, would you bet that he's going to be here next year? And if you don't feel comfortable answering that, would you be shocked if he's not here next year after what you heard from him last night, or by the time you guys listened to this 2 nights ago after the game against Brooklyn?
I'll go with I'll kind of answer the latter question. Would I be shocked if he's not here next year? And honestly, just based off of the way he spoke last night, I would not be shocked if he did not return. Just off the simple fact that one, Gores does not live in Michigan, so he's not always in here to see see everything on a day-to-day basis. And when he was there yesterday, first off, we already know the Pistons are closing in on one of their 2 worst seasons in franchise history. But with the owner team governor, make sure I said it right, the team governor in the building, the Pistons have now won single-digit home games for the first time in the 82-game format on Fan Appreciation Night. They're going to finish with one of the worst home records in team history on Fan Appreciation Night in Tom Gores' front row to see that, along with the entire product. So just the way that Casey talked, I wouldn't be shocked. I wouldn't be shocked either way. I believe that the way the season has gone you lose Marvin Bagley didn't even play the first 13 games due to an MCL sprain, and then you lose Cade Cunningham 12 games into the season due to season-ending surgery. They've had a litany of injuries throughout the entire year, and because of those injuries, I believe that it was approximately like a little bit over 30% of this year, he had a different roster. Close to 30-40%, he had a different starting unit out there. So with just adding everything together, I wouldn't be surprised if they said, hey, we're going to go ahead and bring him back just to see what he can do with the full healthy roster. But the other part is I can obviously see them going in a different direction, because regardless of how much of a teacher, how much respect people have for Dwane Casey, which he really is a great teacher and a great guy, this is still not Troy Weaver's guy. And I could see it right now being the time like, hey, we have a very young roster. We have some great lottery picks. We're about to be on another great lottery pick, potentially number 1, somewhere between 1 and 3. Let's now go ahead and turn the reins over to somebody else who may be able to go ahead and take them to that next step of developing these players. So I would not be shocked if he did not return, just based off of everything going together, and then the comments from last night just really being the sprinkle on the Sunday.
So what you said about him not being Weaver's guy is what makes me believe that this may very well be his final season with the Detroit Pistons, because not only is he not Weaver's guy, and that doesn't mean Weaver doesn't like him or anything.
Yeah.
But that's not the guy he hired. When a GM takes over a team, they usually go out and they get their guy. And he hasn't done that yet. And with this offseason coming up, with the letter that he wrote to fans, and the expectations for next year, with this being now Cade's third season coming up, with another high lottery pick, a free agency coming up with a lot of cap space, with the expectation to field a good product onto the floor. These past few years, it was just rebuilding, and there wasn't really any expectations to try to win many games.
Yeah.
Next season, I think that changes. I think with the idea around what they want for this team changing next season, I think this may be the perfect time, or at least Weaver may view it as the perfect time to, hey, Casey, you did what we needed you to do. You stuck with us through the rebuild era, or the rebuild phase. You took those losses onto your coaching record. Like, you did that for us. You helped develop some of these guys, help them become young men. But now we're moving into a next step where we'd like to have someone else at the helm for that. I could 100% see that being exactly what happens. And right now, after how he talked yesterday, I don't think it's coincidence with Tom Gore showing up and meeting with him beforehand, I'm probably leaning towards him probably not returning next year, which is.
And then you just got to look at the way the years have gone. Look, there's 82 games in a regular NBA season. Regardless of whether the Pistons win these last 2 games or not, Casey has not won 82 games over 4 seasons. He's 79 and 221 over the past 4 years. Regardless of whether we're rebuild or not, that's going to be a tough sell for fans to say, hey, we're going to bring him back for a 6th year. If the Pistons do not do well next season under a new voice, I mean, that is potentially expected. It's going to be a guy coming in with a new roster, new expectations, new system. But to kind of keep things the status quo, you're not even despite the record, you're just not really seeing what you would want to see as far as the development process from some of these guys. Yes, he's developing some of the players individually, but as a cohesive unit, it just seems like something is missing there. So that could be, it could be due to injuries, because again, Cade Cunningham is a significant piece that's going to make all of this eventually work in the long run. But it goes back to just everything combined together, and the fact that Troy Weaver has yet to bring in this guy, because at the end of the day, Troy Weaver is still, regardless of whether that is his guy or not, Troy Weaver is still on the hook for how this team looks. And does he want to go down without his own coach that he selected or had input on? And let's just be real, I don't think that he would want to.
That's completely fair. So let me know what you guys think about this. Do you guys think Dwane Casey may actually be gone after this season? Let me know in the comment section down below, or over on Twitter at @KukaHill. Coming up, is there now also pressure on Troy Weaver? I don't feel like there's been much pressure over the last few years since he took over the team to really put a good product on the floor. Is that changing now? Is there pressure on him? We're going to talk with Corey about that when we come back. But first, I've got to tell you guys about one of our sponsors, Nissan. So, Nissan's most electric player of the week is brought to you by the all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya. Now, over the last few weeks, we've had player of the week such as James Wiseman. We've had Killian Hayes have a week. I believe Jalen Duren won a week. This past week, we are 100% giving the Nissan most electric player of the week to Jaden Ivey. Jaden Ivey has been absolutely spectacular lately. He's been fierce. He's been fearlessly elegant. He's been powerful. He's been amazing for the Detroit Pistons. And the crazy thing is, he started off the month of March playing probably the worst basketball of his season, and then just flipped the switch like that, and is now in the midst of his best streak of the season. He's shooting around 46% over the last 2 weeks from the field, 41% from deep on a lot of attempts, pull-up shots, moving off-ball threes. He's playing extremely well, and that's not even taking into account the fact that he just had a double-double, 10 assists, continues to improve as a playmaker. He's been just absolutely fantastic for the Pistons. So he's by far Nissan's most electric player of the week this week for the Detroit Pistons. The 2023 Nissan Ariya pins you to the seat power and premium intelligence all-in-one EV. The all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya the EV for people who love to drive. Shop now at nissanusa.com. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button. Again, we are in that race with Locked On Blazers. We're trying to catch up. We're trying to surpass them. We're just 200 subscribers away. So please hit that subscribe button for all of you guys who are not subscribed and are listening. Or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. All right, so we just got done speaking about Dwane Casey and some of the quotes that came out from him after the game against the Brooklyn Nets. Last week, we didn't really talk about it on the podcast because there's some other things that were going on and we talked about. But Troy Weaver released a letter to the Pistons fan base about this season, talked about how this season was a disappointment and he's sorry and that they're going to, they're still on this path to greatness, to rebuilding this city or what's the word he used? Restoring this city and its this sports team, and how we're all in this together, moving forward, and things are going to get better, like et cetera, et cetera. The stuff you'd probably expect someone to come out and say after a disappointing season like this. Is there pressure now on Troy Weaver? Over the last few years, he's taken over a team that was not very good. He had to rebuild from scratch. He had to, it was tough. It was a tough rebuild for him at the beginning. He's done a pretty good job, I'd say. He's got Cade, which was a little bit of luck, but everyone has to get a little bit lucky when building a team. If you don't get any luck on your side, it's just not going to work. It's not going to happen. He got Cade Cunningham. He found a good pick in Jaden Ivey at 5, where he could have went different routes, but he went with Ivey at 5. Turns out to be a great pick so far. Jalen Duren at 13, a great pick so far. Depending where you stand with Isaiah Stewart getting drafted at 16, it seems like a fine pick, at the very least a fine pick. He flipped Sadiq Bey for James Wiseman, who was the number 2 pick in that draft, someone he believes has a lot of potential. So we'll see how that plays out. And I know a lot of people are completely out on Killian Hayes. That probably is a fair one to call a miss, even if Killian turns out to be a backup point guard. I'm a big fan of Killian's, but even if he does come up as a backup point guard, it's probably fair to call that a miss at 7. But either way, I think he's done a fine job getting good talent for the Pistons. He has not done a fine job getting wins on the floor. That has not been the goal thus far. They have not won many games. That wasn't the point of the last few years. Could that be changing? It sounds like next season is the year they want to win. They want to improve. They want to put a good product on the floor. And Corey, my question to you is, I think a lot of us see that, but is there pressure now on Weaver? Like, is he feeling it that, like, man, I gotta get a good team out there next year. They could be coming for me. They could be coming for my job soon. Do you feel like he's having that type of pressure, or do you believe this is just part of the plan? Like, this was always the year he wanted to take a next step. He's not feeling anything. He still feels pretty cool, and this was always a part of it.
What I get from Weaver's letter and where Weaver's stance is right now is kind of fits with what happened yesterday with the talk with Tom Gores and Dwane Casey. Next year, they do not want to see a repeat of this year next year. And I don't think that Troy Weaver is under the gun or should be, because, again, while he has put his imprint on his team by the players that he's drafted, the players that he signed in the trade acquisitions, the real stamp is going to be from his coach that he selects. And I don't think that he's under the I don't think he's under the pressure right now of winning just yet, because he has not had the coach that you can't go at him and say, hey, you didn't do a good job of putting this together when you didn't let him get his guy to make these pieces work. So I think once Troy Weaver has the opportunity to pick his coach or pick the coach of his vision, if it doesn't work out at that point, then things will start getting a little hot, because you can, for the Killian, was it a miss? Yes. Compared to all of the other picks, yes, it is a miss. And you could also argue, hey, maybe the pick was good, but maybe the coach did not pull out of him what they needed to. It's a whole bunch of different theories and philosophies you can throw with that. But end of the day, I don't think he's under the gun just yet. I just think that Troy Weaver is a competitor. He built a young Thunder team, had a hand in that, and I believe he's just trying to bring that same mentality here. And it's going to take him to have that coach and get that true imprint on it before people can just really come for his job and it be tangible.
So let me ask you this. What do you believe is the standard being set for next year? Because like you said, Tom Gore showing up and then talking with Casey, talking with Weaver. Now we get these quotes from Weaver, or not quotes from Weaver, but the quotes from Casey after the game. We got the letter from Weaver the week before. What do you think? It feels like it 100% Tom Gore's came in, whether it was actually yesterday. Maybe I'm sure he has obviously that he has their phone number. I'm sure they talk more than just like if he comes to town. But I'm sure they have an understanding of how he felt even before then.
Yeah.
But I think it's clear, at least in my opinion, that Tom Gore's is letting them know, hey, we need to have something next year. It doesn't mean it has to be like a championship, a contending team or anything, but something needs to be happening next year. What do you believe that something is? What do you think that standard needs to be next year that they're looking for?
Honestly, the realistic standard for next season needs to be this has to, at bare minimum, has to be a play-in team, or at least trending towards it. Maybe they miss out on the play-in for a game or two, but they have to at least be trending in that direction next season. I believe that is, if I had to guess what the mandate is, it would be that, because right now they're about to finish the game with finish the season with somewhere between 16 and 18 wins. We'll see what happens. They should be able to at least double that with the healthy roster. So I think going into next season, that's like, hey, at least bare minimum play-in should be what we as a franchise should be looking for. We'll see what they do in the draft. We'll see what kind of moves Troy Weaver may make during free agency trades. He's had a tendency to have some type of curveball up his sleeve that ends up working out. So we'll see what that happens with, because they for the first time in a long time, they now have the draft capital and they have the tradable assets. So who knows what they'll be able to conjure up in the offseason. But bare minimum, I'm believing that play-in should be the standard for this team, because you still don't know what you have, but you're winning 16 to 18 games with a pretty much depleted roster. All the pieces back healthy, you should be able to at least double that win total.
Before we move on, let me ask you this. You personally, are you expecting a big offseason from the Pistons? Do you think there's going to be do you think this is going to be an offseason where you see big splashes happen? Or do you think there's going to be do you think they're going to go the route of marginal signings and adding to the already pieces here? Or do you think in this next season we could be looking at a completely new roster? What do you think you're predicting that's going to happen here?
I think they've done the marginal signings thing for the past couple of years. If they were to go ahead and try to do something bold, I would see it being this offseason, since they have everything that they need to possibly make one of those moves. You have Bogdanovich, who could be a tradable asset. You have James Wiseman, who could be a tradable asset. You have the pieces to put something together and, potentially go grab another piece. So if they were going to be aggressive to try to make that next step, I would see them being aggressive this year. I don't know who the target would be, but I could see them doing something this offseason to try to go ahead and get that win total in the right direction, get this rebuild or restore moving along with something that's really tangible, because the past couple of years they're being in the 20 wins, and you're seeing those incremental signings. I guess people want to say they're properly tanking, whatever you want to say it, but you see them making a small moves to try to get better. But I think that this offseason is where they take that aggressive step to be a play-in or a playoff team next year.
All right. So Corey believes that the standard should be at least competing for the play-in, maybe even making the play-in. So I think the next question is, which we'll talk about in the upcoming segment, how far are the Pistons currently from that standard? How far is this roster from being a play-in basketball team? We'll talk about that when we come back. But first, I've got to tell you guys about one of our sponsors, FanDuel Sportsbook. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back. If your first bet doesn't win, just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores to threes drained. And a player prop that I've been telling you guys I feel real confident about, and you guys should be taking the over on, Jaden Ivey's assist. Jaden Ivey's improved as a playmaker. I've been taking the over in his assists. Last game he had 10 assists. If you guys listen to me, I feel like you guys would be making a little bit of money. So I think the player prop you guys should be taking advantage of before the end of the season is Jaden Ivey's assist. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. So don't miss out on your chance for a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, help us catch up to Locked On Blazers. I would really appreciate it. Or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. Corey, in the last segment, we talked about what the standard is for next season. You mentioned that you feel like it's the play-in. How far do you believe the Pistons are? On this podcast, I've mentioned, I'd love to hear if you agree or disagree with this. On this podcast, I've mentioned that I feel like the Pistons may not be as far away as some people believe. I feel like that they have a young core, and I compare him to OKC because Weaver came from OKC, and I feel like based on some of his moves, he's kind of going the same route with them. And what I see with the Pistons is that Weaver has collected a bunch of young guys. He wants to win with his guys. He wants to win with his young core, with his young guys, develop them, and let them be the reason why this team is moving on to the next step. And I feel like I don't feel like this team's that far away with it because I think with Cade, Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, I think you got to find trio there. I honestly feel like they have the rest of their young core. I don't think they're stars, but I think they're role players if you put the right players around them. And I think they can be contributors to a team. I think probably backups. But I don't think there's nothing wrong with that. So I think they have Jaden Ivey, Cade, Duren in the starting lineup. I think they have Killian, Livers, Stu, and Wiseman coming off the bench. I think they can feel fine with those guys if they fill in the right pieces. So for me, I've said for the last few weeks that if this team could just add some wings. I think the wing room that they've had this year was probably the worst wing room, especially defensively, in the NBA. And I feel like if you have a wing room, if they go out and address that need and get some 3-and-D guys to fit next to Cade and Ivey, to fit coming off the bench, and then you just fill them in with the already young core that they have, I think that instantly makes the team better. I've said before, I think what's stopped this team from really being good this year, obviously Cade getting hurt, but even if Cade would have played, I felt like it was the roster construction. I feel like it was almost done on purpose. I said before the year, I thought he did it, Weaver that is, did it on purpose to have another high lottery pick. I feel like if they had like normal lineups and lineups that made sense and good roster construction that made sense around their young core, they would be a better basketball team. So I don't think they have to go out and make some big changes or some big moves. I think if they were to go out and get, I'm long-winded here. I'm trying to get through it, but
Good.
I feel like if they were to get like Cam Johnson and then maybe like a Grant Williams and then plus their pick in the draft, right there you feel better about your wing room. You feel better about some guys in Grant Williams and Cam that maybe could go up 3 to 4 on the small forward, power forward can play those roles. They play defense. They shoot threes. They space the floor around your ball handlers. And now all of a sudden your roster makes sense. You got Burks coming off the bench with Killian, Livers, Stu, and Wiseman. That should have some good spacing. If Stu is actually a shooter, and we saw promise from that. And then the starting lineup, you could have, Cade, Ivey, Cam Johnson, maybe the first-round pick, and then Jalen Duren. Maybe you want to add another guy. This is assuming, I also have assumed that Bojan may get traded. But that's this. Without going deep into it, that's my overall point. I feel like if they address the wing room and just make some signings like that, I actually don't think the team's too far away. Do you disagree with that, or do you think there's going to be or needs to be some big move that really shakes up the roster?
Well, I agree with your sentiment that some of the guys, like Isaiah Stewart, Killian Hayes, those could be definitely quality guys coming off the bench. I do also agree with you that they need to go out and desperately address that wing area. Their defense in that area just has been very, I'm trying to use the correct word, abysmal for the entire season. So that is going to be a glaring need. Cam Johnson will be an excellent fit. But yeah, that's just really the direction that, how can I say this? They making a great splash would definitely put them in that play-in realm. But if they didn't even have the injuries they had this year, it would, even with the roster that did not make sense, they still possibly could have been a potential, at least trending towards that play-in team. I don't think they would have made it. Let's be clear. I don't think they would have made the play-in, but I think if they did not suffer the injuries they did this year, they would have been trending towards that. So if they go out and address that wing area, if they go out and get some 3-and-D guys, some quality guard play, because the one thing that there's really been hindering them too is they have no spacing. It's just totally lacking. So if they go out and get some guys that can go ahead and stretch a defense, go get some guys that can actually shoot beyond the perimeter besides Bojan, because they don't really have that many guys that can shoot 10 to 15 feet out. They just don't, not consistently. So if they go out and get that, they're going to be able to trend towards that. And they have a collection of young, I guess you say, gym rats, something that is kind of in the image of that young OKC team. We've pretty much bringing that same model here right now. I think from being a play-in team, if they can get everybody back healthy and they make small incremental pieces, they would be able to be a play-in team next year. If they go out and make a splash, then now you're talking about, okay, they could go ahead and possibly be one of those, 7, 6, 5, 5, 6, 7 teams, because I mean, you've seen the chemistry of Jalen Duren and Jaden Ivey throughout the year. I think that's only going to develop. I think with the way Cade is going to come back, and I believe Cade is going to be able to be fit and healthy this year, because I don't know if people have seen him. He's put on a lot of muscle. He's bulked up. So if you get him back bulked up, you get that trio, you get that nucleus gelling, and then you still be able to have those quality pieces on the roster. Just add a couple of fill in the blanks there. You'll be good. I still think they also do need to keep some savvy veterans around. I really do like probably bringing back, only one will be Alec Burks. I believe that Jaden Ivey benefited a lot from being next to Burks. So maybe he's one guy you can keep around, because you still need an adult in the room, even with the team that's young and developing. But they make some small incremental pieces. They could go ahead and transfer that play in. Sorry, I got kind of long-winded and went all over, but I was trying to connect all the dots together.
I just did the same thing. I talked for like 4 minutes there. So I'm glad you said that about Burks. I feel like Burks, you've seen both Jaden Ivey and Killian Hayes all of a sudden start doing his little foul drawing stuff. That as soon as they feel contact, they just fly back and they throw some stuff up. Like
he was just so great at getting to the line, getting the and one. It was just like, dude, it was almost like it was his calling card all year. And then you slowly started to see Ivy become a little bit more composed, because really, the first half of the season, to me, I think Ivy was just really going off of his raw athleticism. But as the season started to progress and get down towards the end, you start to see him be a little bit more composed as a playmaker. Instead of just shooting from one end to the other, he played with like a controlled speed that allowed him to do some of what Burks was doing, go ahead and getting those and ones and getting those easy buckets. So yeah.
So this is, and we'll wrap up with this right here. This is something I've been asking a lot of my guests, and I'd love to hear your input on this. One of the things I've said to my listeners many, many times is that, yes, you want this team to get better. You want this team to put a good product next year, and you want to see them win games. However, I feel like there is it's a very thin line that you need to walk when you're restoring and you want to build a long-term successful team. And the example I always use is that you don't want to feel the pressure and be antsy and all of a sudden go all in on an off season and end up like the Atlanta Hawks. And the Atlanta Hawks, I use them as an example because they went all in for that 1 year. They made a bunch of signings, a bunch of moves, and they kind of got they weren't as flexible anymore now. And they made the Eastern Conference Finals that year, but now you see them, they're stuck. They did make a move for Murray. They were able to try and make a move for him, but they're kind of stuck. They just brought back Bogdanovich. They're kind of stuck, and they're on back-to-back years. They're not having great years, and now there's, is Trey that guy? Will Trey want out? Now, all of a sudden, I feel like that's a lot to do with the fact they went all in faster than they should have. They should have been a little bit more patient with it. However, you don't want to be too slow. You don't want to be too patient to where you're just passing up, what's the word I'm looking for? Legitimate moves to help you move along in the process. So that's something that I've said over and over, that yes, I want this team to get better in this offseason. Yes, I want them to make moves to try to get better, but I also don't want them to make the wrong moves or get too antsy with it to where they overpay for someone this offseason. They go all in this offseason, and now this is the squad you got for the next 3-4 years. And what happens if that's not good enough? Now you're stuck 3 years now with this squad because of what you've done in this offseason. Do you agree with that sentiment? Do you think that's something that Weaver needs to walk the line of? Or, again, and you can disagree. I'd love to hear if you disagree. Do you think it's something that he really needs to swing for the fences at some point, and this is the offseason he needs to swing?
Now, two things. First, I don't think that this has to be the season that he swings for the fences. Just for me, I was just predicting, like, okay, just based off the letter, based off, Gore, the Gore thing, I was thinking, like, maybe they might try to swing for the fences. But does he have to? Absolutely not. Weaver's been walking that fine line well because you are on Pistons Twitter just like I am. Pistons fans wanted him to swing for the fences last year for a guy by the name of DeAndre Ayton. What did he do? He did not do it. He made a heck of a move and got Jalen Duren, who to me, for what they are trying to build, I'm not going to sit up here and say he's going to be better than DeAndre Ayton. I'm just going to say Jalen Duren has significant upside that will be very beneficial for this Pistons team moving forward. That will make him a franchise staple and a starting center for this team for years to come. So I don't think that he necessarily has to swing for the fences yet. I think right now, walking that line of just understanding, like, okay, let's take the Saddiq Bey trade. Saddiq Bey at the time was one of the worst defenders at the wing position in the league, and he kind of plateaued. Saddiq Bey, from where he started the first couple of years, you started thinking like, okay, this guy could really be something. Then he kind of plateaued. So what did Weaver do? He went ahead and saw a guy in James Wiseman who, by all accounts and by, from all the Warriors players, especially Draymond Green, it's not the guy that didn't have talents. It's that he was on a championship team and needed reps. Now you're starting to see that even though it's not showing up in the win column, trading Saddiq Bey for James Wiseman has proved to be a smart move because now James Wiseman has a pretty high upside moving forward. So I think Weaver has been doing a great job of just walking that line of, making the right moves. Okay, let me make this see how this works. Okay, let me make this see how this works. Because even if, like you said, you thought Boyan might be gone, I think Wiseman could be gone too. Even if those guys do not work out, he's acquired pieces that could be tradable assets down the line to go and swing for the fences. So I think he's been walking that fine line right now by making the right signings and the right trades so that when the time comes, he will have the package available that will make sense to a team to go and get that piece to be able to skyrocket.
And I will say this. At some point, especially for a team like Detroit, a small market, at some point you do swing for the fences. At some point, you have to. You saw it with Stan Van Gundy. People may have thought that he swung for the wrong fences. Maybe some people thought maybe they went too fast with it. Maybe they shouldn't have pulled the trigger at that point. But that was the move that you had for a small market team. Eventually, there comes a moment where you have to pull the swing for the fences. Stan Van Gundy did it. And now, at some point, Weaver is going to swing for the fences. It's just a matter of when is the right time. And before we wrap up, I just want to say this. The thing I keep saying on the podcast, I'm going to keep reiterating it, is that you want to make that swing when you feel like your young guys that you've built around are ready. And I'm not sure if they're actually ready to compete like legit winning basketball. I think Ivy, he's a rookie, he's played really well, but he has a lot of stuff he still needs to improve on. Duren, he still has a lot of stuff he needs to improve on. Isaiah Stewart, Killian Hayes, whoever they add, and another thing, whoever they add in this draft, it's not realistic to expect an 18, 9-year-old to come in and be an impactful NBA player when it comes to winning. Most of them come in.
Not at all.
Yeah, most of them come in. They're not great defensively. They have some stuff they have to work out, and that's fine. That's part of it. But that's just the thing I really am watching for. When are these young guys going to be ready? And whenever they're ready, whenever you think they've made that step to where, hey, if we swing for the fences and we add this guy to the team, they are actually ready to play winning basketball and they're making this legit progress, then you do it. I'm not sure if this is this offseason, though I do think it could very well be the following offseason. I think 24, so this is 23-24. So 24 offseason, I think may be the year you see them really try and make a swing for something legitimate. Now, if something opens up, maybe they do this offseason. Maybe there's something really good that opens up, but I think
if you have a healthy If you have a healthy Cade, you have a healthy Ivy and a healthy Duran, and you see them all trending upward next season, and they're looking like, okay, they're in the play-in or they're a bottom 7 or 8 seed, then I'm like, then you could probably see we were like, okay, now it's time to make a move. Now it's time to go ahead and swing for the fences, so we'll be in that top 6.
No, yeah, I completely agree. It could even happen at the trade deadline. If they're like at the trade deadline, the Pistons are one of those teams that are really pushing for the play-in, maybe even the playoffs. Like they're showing that kind of improvement. You could even see them swing at the deadline. It could definitely happen. We could see it, but at the end of the day, I don't think they're too far. It doesn't sound like Corey thinks they're too far away either. And hey, we'll see what Weaver does this offseason. But that's all I've got for you guys today. Corey, thank you for coming on to the podcast, man. I really appreciate it. It was a ton of fun. Make sure you guys go follow Corey on Twitter at Corey E. Woods. Also, you can find his work over at mlive.com as well. Beat writer for the Detroit Pistons over there. Does some great stuff, great work. So definitely go check him out. Again, thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. Hit that subscribe button at the YouTube channel. Please, we're on our way to 5,000 subscribers. We're trying to beat out my Locked On Blazers host, man. I'm getting ready to talk some trash to Mike, man, but we got to pass him. So I need you guys to hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Stay safe, go Pistons, and peace out.
Thanks.